who should be the 5th OG Bloodline member. I'm Will, that's Brandon. We are the Cousins of Destruction Wrestling Podcast. As always, let's cheers, talk about some wrestling.
Yeah, and before we get into that, I just want to take a second to do a special thank you to you guys. We reached 2,000 subscribers on YouTube, so thank you to each and every one of you. We really appreciate that. Now let's get into it.
Ditto. Yeah, so basically we're going to have a discussion about it. Instead of doing our normal list, it feels like a list would be kind of cliche, given that it does seem like it's whittled down to a couple main people that you would expect. But let's go over the current state of what's happening right now in this OG Bloodline shenanigans. So as of last week on SmackDown, Bronson Reed has joined the Bloodline 2.0 in their War Games effort. Sami Zayn and Jey Uso and Jimmy have been the worst recruits in history, going after a bunch of people. They went after Rey Mysterio first. He in the background, he said no, probably, because we ain't seen him. They asked Bron Breakker, and he kind of didn't give us an on-screen answer, but he ain't been doing stuff with them, so I'm guessing he said no. And then they asked LA Knight on SmackDown. I mean, I could have told you that was a no. That was a nah. And the one guy that they've been bugging this entire time is Mr. Seth Rollins, who has had the most crazy history ever with Roman Reigns. No reason for him to join. He keeps saying he will never, ever, ever, ever join this bloodline, but on the most recent Raw, we did have Solo Sikoa come out and screw him over in his match against Bronson Reed, so things are getting nice and spicy on that, but we may as well lead in with that, right? So the Seth Rollins drama is obviously what's been circulating around the most. Is that going to be enough to get him to the bloodline? Just Solo Sikoa screwing Bronson Reed or screwing him over in the Bronson Reed match?
I'm going to say no. At least they might make it where it's enough, but I don't think that is enough. I think there needs to be more. This comes out, this will come out on Thursday. So we've got SmackDown in a day or so. I think there's going to be something there. Now I'm probably wrong, but I think there needs to be something on SmackDown. You've only got a total of 3 shows until Survivor Series.
Yeah.
You've got SmackDown, Raw, SmackDown. So you got to press the gas pedal. Like, you got to accelerate this now. For as much as we talked about the Jimmy J and even the Sami part, you could say was sped up for the OG Bloodline. We're like, God, this story's been so good. It's been long, right? All of this stuff in terms of finding the members for the OG Bloodline, getting them to reconnect and adding a 5th member, it's all sped up. Ultimately, that's probably what ends up doing them in, but it's like, I would have liked to see, I guess, something before now. I feel like we're just rushing it in to get the 5th member just because, and I'm not really a fan of that, but ultimately, I feel like Seth is going to be that 5th member. I feel like as much as he hates Roman, maybe he loves the other 3 enough that he's like, okay, maybe I'll do it for that.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of is that enough? No, is my flat out answer. But like you've kind of said, and what people have kind of translated in our comment sections of our stuff, they all feel the same way. It does feel like the whole thing's being sped up a little bit. And then you do have a crowd saying, the people who say it's been sped up are saying that because Roman still hasn't apologized to anybody. In fact, the only time he did apologize, it was sarcastically to Jey Uso when he was talking about he's sorry that he wasted his time hearing Sami out a couple weeks ago before Sami eventually reconciled that. But so the sped up crowd is saying, we haven't gotten anything from Roman really to even have any of these guys except for Jimmy back. I mean, a lot of people are still under the impression of like, well, Jey even rushed back and not to mention Sami. And so like you said, we only got 1, 2, 3 shows before Survivor Series. And so throwing Seth in there, that just feels like the ultimate speedball. And then you have the other side of the crowd who's saying, well, these are grown men. I've seen that in our comments. He's like, well, Roman doesn't owe any of these guys apologies because they decided to back him up from the get-go. And it's if they don't have to do this. They don't have to be a part of this at all. And they each have their own reasoning for being in it that isn't Roman. So that's also a good point. But in terms of Seth Rollins, we already are saying that it's not enough to get Seth to the bloodline, in our opinion, is the Bronson Reed screw job, the Solo Sikoa stuff that happened on Raw. How in the world can they make this happen in a logical way by the time Survivor Series comes around for Seth Rollins to join the OG Bloodline?
Yeah, it's a great question to give. I think if I knew that answer 1,000%, I wouldn't be here on a podcast. I'd be writing for them. Anyway, to me, to have Seth join this team is going to, like, yes, it's going to make sense somewhat, but for me, I'm not going to be completely bought in. I think we need to see, obviously, something on SmackDown. I think he comes to SmackDown. Maybe Bloodline 2.0 is jumping the original Bloodline or something like that. The numbers are kind of outweighing it, and you have Rollins maybe getting caught up in the heat of the moment. He comes for the save. Like I said, I think maybe he's there for the other three, and maybe him and Roman don't really cross paths. You just mentioned the crowd that says they're grown men. Roman doesn't need to apologize. I still think that he does, in order to be a cohesive unit, right? I think that that's what needs to happen.
But not to Seth.
No, I don't think to Seth. I think that's like an own separate thing.
Yeah.
To me, at least. So I think that that's going to cause a divide with them. And ultimately, maybe you don't get those apologies at all before War Games. That's kind of what I'm starting to think, because not only are we not really seeing anything on screen where Roman's like, yeah, we see Roman going through it. We see him going through like distraught and shock and all these like different emotions we haven't seen before. We haven't really seen the like epileptic side, like the apologetic side of him. Like, hey, let's sit here. Let me sit these guys down. So maybe that comes after War Games.
In terms of it making sense, if Seth does end up being the fifth member and them in the next three shows, how the hell do they make sense of this? I think they do it all on SmackDown. How I would do it is I would have Seth do it the sped up way, in terms of that was enough on Monday night to get him wanting to join the OG Bloodline, and he starts the show finding Sami, finding Jay, finding Jimmy, and saying, you know what, I hate Bronson Reed enough. Screw Roman. I'll deal with that later. I want him in a cage to finish this once and for all. And then you have Roman eventually, or them saying, okay, well, we got to go talk to Roman. Tell him we found our fifth. And then they walk into the room and Roman's like, what the hell? Hell no, it's Seth Rollins. Are you freaking kidding me? Been there, done that. Him being on my team. I ain't going there again. And then something happens later in the night where you do have, it seems like the weekly occurrence at this point of Roman Reigns getting his ass whooped. And then you have Seth Rollins coming in and make the save, and maybe even give him a pity apology that Roman may need to hear just for the years. Maybe Seth can just flat out be like, look, dude, I made mistakes in the past. I'm sorry. This isn't even about you. I want Bronson Reed. Let me be by your side one more time at this War Games. And I think that that's really the only way you can write that.
Yeah, I think that's really the only thing they can do at this point. Maybe for me, not even like an apology, not even like an I'm sorry. Maybe it's a, Roman, we have our issues, to satisfy the crowd that's like, they're grown men. Like, yeah, we have our issues. We have our problems. I'm not here for you. I'm here for myself. I'm going to be on your team for me. Maybe that's the way they do it. I think one way or another, it obviously has to happen on SmackDown, and you have to maybe have the combination of stuff that they've done kind of with Sami, how there's like some doubt, but then Roman and Sami kind of had that look last SmackDown. Like, okay, like I can trust you. Maybe we get that look, not this week, maybe next week going into Survivor Series. That's probably how I would do it as well.
Yeah, I agree. But, we focus a lot on Seth Rollins. There are other people involved in this, or who could be involved with this. One that's circulating that I've seen in a lot of our stuff is the simple answer here that we all thought was going to happen the second that they decided to go 5v5 in War Games. The second that they said, we are going to go 5x5, we need other members. The man Cody Rhodes just teamed with them. Why do you think that they haven't gone and asked Cody Rhodes to join this bloodline?
Yeah, it's almost like, I don't know, like an unspoken rule or something. Like, I feel like from Sami, Jay, and Jimmy, they're just like, well, there's no way him and Roman can get along. The last time that we've really kind of seen Roman and Cody interact was like that on-field masterpiece promo of like, you're in my way in life and all this stuff. So I would say that's probably like the main reason we haven't seen that. I would say that there's enough for Sami, Jimmy, and Jay to know about Roman to say like, at the end of the day, we can't ask him. We can ask everybody else. If there's 50 people, he's going to be number 50.
Yeah, I mean, there's your kayfabe in storyline answer. I think the answer is as simple as nobody would want to see it, right?
Yeah.
It is a good time to get Cody away from the bloodline. I mean, it seems like that's a topic that everybody in wrestling, commentary speaks about. Get Cody away from the bloodline. Get Cody away from the bloodline. At the time of recording and at the time of this coming out, Cody and Kevin Owens are not officially in a match for Survivor Series, but it sure as hell looks like we're heading that way. So they have their own stuff. But it is, in my opinion, it is kind of funny because Jay and Cody are cool. They even won tag team titles together.
Sami.
Yeah, and Sami and him are cool.
And Jimmy and him. I mean, Jimmy was like, I think when Jimmy came back, Cody and him kind of had that little backstage segment, right? And Jimmy was like, I see you're carrying stuff on your own or whatever. And Cody was like, yeah, I see family or whatever he said. Like they had that little back. So everybody and Cody are cool.
It's just crazy that we get like back, not crazy in a bad way. It just doesn't seem logical that we have like backstage segments of the bloodline trying to recruit like LA Knight and we're not getting anything with Cody. Like we could have, I feel like we missed at least a small backstage segment of Cody giving his reasoning for not being the member.
Maybe we'll get that on SmackDown. Maybe, maybe they're still looking for a fifth member and maybe you just see somebody knock on the bus. Maybe that's what we get.
Yeah, Sami come out of the bus stumbling after drinking a bunch of Wheatley vodka with Cody Rhodes.
Maybe that's the thing. I found a fifth member, Roman. He's just sitting there drunk. Yeah. Why not? I mean, I maybe we get some sort of acknowledgement of that.
Yeah.
Because it does feel like a hole in the story. Like you feel like, okay, you've teamed with them before. Like you said, the Jay stuff. Cody's gone against Bloodline 2.0 more than anybody almost. So why not at least ask?
Yeah, speaking of holes in stories, it does feel like Bloodline 2.0 has made their living. The whole point of them is that they're a bunch of recruited other Samoan bloodline members that, they're the dangerous ones and stuff. It does feel like that's one side of OG Bloodline that is lacking, right? They haven't had their splash new recruit. And maybe, contract wise, logistics of wrestling, we don't know who is exactly signed, who's not, who they're looking to sign. That's part of the fun in wrestling is that, hopefully it works where when you get a new debut, you get the debut and then you find out about the contract. That's the best part, right? But are there any odds here that we do get a recruited family member, maybe a Zilla, someone like that?
I would hope so. I mean, like in a perfect world, like everything goes perfectly, you get that fifth member, I would say yes. But I'm also to the point now where I've kind of tempered my expectations with it. I don't have a problem with the Bronson Reed one. The addition for the fifth member, at least for OG Bloodline, everybody we've kind of named has kind of felt like lackluster in a sense to me. Like, it's like, okay, like that's their fifth member. Like, okay, like it doesn't really move the needle for me. Something like that would do that. Now I know with WWE though, like I said, I try to temper my expectations because every time I get them super high, even for this match, we built it up in our heads for months and months and months and months and months. And it's here. And don't get me wrong. I am excited. Do not get me wrong. I am extremely excited for this. But I was a enemy to myself. I built it up so much that I'm like, dang, we're not getting Zilla, or we're not getting this, or we're not the wise man. Where's the wise man? We don't get you know what I mean?
I'm just waiting for them to eventually, in terms of this whole thing, fifth member, no, I don't think they're going to be able to, I don't think in 3 episodes of weekly programming that they're going to be able to.
Yeah, speaking of push, that would be like fast.
They're going to introduce somebody, especially like a Zilla. And I think Zilla signed to another company. And, I think he's in recent trouble with you see his little interview where the guy called wrestling fake and he choked him out.
Oh.
But I one day, I hope Zilla is the Jacob Fatu equivalent for the OG Bloodline, something like that, where you do have like a recruited guy that comes out of nowhere and is able to stand toe to toe with Fatu, and you get that sort of impending, doom onto that side. But we have mentioned already Seth Rollins, who seems to be the odds favorite, but there is one key component to all this stuff that is looming over all of our heads, especially after the ending of last week's SmackDown when he but he blocked or lost Roman's number, or his phone's broken, or I don't know what the hell is going on, but Mr. Paul Heyman
Or did Sami have the phone? And Sami,
Sami dropped the phone on the sofa.
That whole thing was there as well.
Yeah, who knows there? But that seems to be the second. So you have Seth Rollins as your betting favorite in the wrestling community, and then right underneath it, it's a Paul Heyman choice pick, basically. And there's three guys there that could come from that, in my opinion. We'll go with the first one that I think is the least likely out of the three of them. But I mentioned earlier how his phone was broken by Solo Sikoa, and that might be one of the reasons why he didn't answer Roman's phone, right? When WrestleMania 40 was coming up, Paul Heyman had two phones. Mm-hmm. He had one phone for the Tribal Chief, and he had one phone for the Final Boss. The Rock showed up at Bad Blood for seemingly no reason after Cody and Roman won. And while he did count to three, did his little neck thing, and walked off, we haven't heard a word. Roman Reigns hasn't acknowledged whether or not The Rock doesn't like him anymore. We have no idea. So, Paul Heyman could still make that call. The Rock could join the OG Bloodline, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about least likely, to me, that is the most least likely thing of all time.
I agree.
I don't really know why The Rock returned. I assume I'm on the other side. I think The Rock is still the puppet master for 2.0.
Yeah.
So Paul Heyman stuff, like obviously Paul and Roman are at odds. So maybe hypothetically, like Paul might be working with The Rock, but I don't think there's any way The Rock gets in there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I still think Rock has a problem with Roman, especially. I don't really see. I've seen that theory thrown around a couple times as well, and I guess I just don't understand it. Maybe they're just reaching for a reason because of the Bad Blood stuff, like because you said they made no sense. But to me, that would make even less sense.
Yeah. No, I'm 100% with you. I think that The Rock there's basically a 0% chance that he wrestles in this match. Maybe he shows up afterward. I'm with you. I do think The Rock is the puppeteer he's the puppet guy for Solo. I think Solo is actually the final boss or the tribal chief on the Bloodline 2.0 is actually The Rock. But I think that's going to be treated in a big heel turn. Like I do think The Rock's going to come back and be on Roman's side for a minute or two, and then we'll treat it as though the heel Rock is turning heel on Roman too.
Yeah, maybe he could do the throat. So he could say the like the throat slit was just a Cody.
Yeah.
Maybe he could say that or something.
Yeah. Something like that. But I'm with you. No, we're not getting The Rock here as much as that part of the story may make sense. But Paul Heyman is also in connection with two other guys, and these two I feel like are the likely picks here. They're part of I would call it the big three of who could be the fifth member. So Seth is one, and then this guy is next. What better equalizer do you have against Bronson Reed's monster than bringing back a beast? Doesn't matter what you think about him right now. I'm just talking about Paul Heyman's ability to call this man up and ask him for some help for his friend Roman Reigns. Brock Lesnar. He could join this match. He could be the fifth member.
Yeah, theoretically he could be. And like you said, obviously Brock's got a complicated past, complicated history. So some people would maybe welcome him. Some people would be like, no, keep him off my screen, whatever the case may be. I had heard the theory thrown around when, Roman's call doesn't go through to Paul. It's like, because Paul doesn't have service on the ranch. He's up there with Brock. I thought that was really funny. I was like, yeah, he's just up there hanging out. In terms of like equalizer, in terms of muscle, in terms of you look at, we talked about it kind of with the women's match as well. Like you look at this men's War Games match, Bloodline 2.0 has the size and strength over the original Bloodline. So you would need some sort of equalizer. Seth's really not that heavy hitter. Roman is kind of like a heavy hitter, but he's not a giant, right? He's not a monster. He's not a beast. He's not a giant, So in terms of like size-wise, you feel like original Bloodline needs something. Now storyline-wise, I guess you could somehow twist and turn it into Paul is turning his back on Roman for Brock, and you could get something there. Adam Pearce posted a picture, I believe earlier today, actually, as we're recording this, with him and Paul and Brock as well. So it's like, I don't even know if there was a caption. So it was like, oh, why would you post that if something wasn't? There seems to be hints, and I don't know if they're just toying with us, because let's be honest, they do like to do that, or if there's something to it. But he would be probably my third choice. out of all three of these people that we're going to talk about today.
I agree. He would also be my third choice. Put aside all the stuff that obviously you can start to say about him, okay? You know all that. We're not going to get into that. Just on paper, kayfabe, wrestling character Brock Lesnar would be awesome in this match. And the idea of like having Paul's two biggest clients in wrestling history team up together in this stage of their career would be so cool, especially given their past together. I mean, they've main evented, I want to say, it's at least 2 Manias together. I don't know if they went 3.
I lost count. Yeah. And just not only Mania matches, just matches. Yeah.
They've main evented big 4 PLEs too many times, honestly. But they have this cool past together. It would be similar to Seth Rollins, though, where it would be like, well, why are you here? Why do you want to back him up now? You didn't like each other for years and years and years and years. Right. So why are you showing up to help now? So I'm with you. It would be cool. It would be very interesting to see how they would book Fatu next to Brock Lesnar, stuff like that. How they would book Bronson Reed, because, and this was still part of the Vince era, I guess. But the last time that we thought that WWE was going to put some giant over Brock Lesnar, he pinned Omos clean at WrestleMania 39. So, it's just like, would Brock Lesnar do the job for the guys? So
yeah, and you look at it, and like you said, obviously he has, for lack of it, off the field, in terms of like football or basketball, off the field issues. Obviously, we're not going to get into that, but if you talk about it just storyline wise, I understand Roman is tied up with the bloodline stuff, and that is a amazing story, a great story that needs to kind of continue to go on towards Mania. But eventually, if he does come back here, and it's because of Paul, you could have a like Brock, Paul, Roman type feud where it's like, who does Paul pick out of those two? What side does Paul pick?
They kind of did that though.
Yeah, I guess so. But you could run it back with like, I guess more like kind of Defiant, because like now it's not the same Roman, I guess. So if you really wanted Roman to like hit rock bottom, like you could have everybody leave Roman.
Yeah.
And that would probably be like the final nail in the coffin. That's the only reason I could see him, to your point. Like I know they did that, but that's the only way I could see him coming back, is if they're going to do that.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. But obviously there's one betting favorite for the Paul Heyman trio of people who he could give a call to.
Stone Cold Steve
Austin. You go, come open a can of whip ass on Fatu. No, we do have.
That would be cool. You signed me up for that. I'd do that.
The final man to speak to Paul Heyman before Solo Sikoa and the Bloodline 2.0 destroyed him on an episode of SmackDown was Mr. CM Punk. Now, this would be full circle for many things, because obviously CM Punk loves that man. He put a promo, that same promo where they spoke to each other. CM Punk basically said that he would do anything for that man. He'd die for that man. He owes his career to that man. CM Punk's got big time love there, right? And in that promo, Paul Heyman warned CM Punk to stay out of it. He was like, I don't want you to end up in this. Basically, they'll hurt you. They'll hurt you. Stay away. Go do your own thing. CM Punk debuted last year after a War Games match. This would be a pretty good full circle moment for kind of all of it. You'd have CM Punk, Paul Heyman. CM Punk's probably the third biggest client of Paul Heyman's, right? Yeah. You could just shoe that. I feel like CM Punk could be shooing, because not only would he just be great in the match, but you could also have Roman deny Seth's entry into the match. Say, no, I don't want Seth Rollins, even if he says yes. And then Paul can bring CM Punk into it. And right there, you're like, you have continued long-term storytelling between Seth and CM Punk, of Seth being like, God damn it, why does he get to go in the match? Why does he get to go after Bronson Reed? Stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So it just feels like CM Punk could be a pick here.
Yeah, you talked about like the betting favorites. Like Seth is like a minus 150. Punk is probably like plus 150, but he's getting closer to Seth, right? Like the closer we get there, the more I'm like, okay, everything you just mentioned, I'm like, yeah, it might be Punk. It might be Punk. Originally when this plan or idea was thrown out there about Punk, I was like, well, that didn't make any sense. Yep. Why would they want CM Punk in there? But the more I think about it, they took Heyman out, so now he's got to fight for Heyman, fight for Paul, and you've got that kind of how the Bloodline 2.0 took him out, so he could stand up for that. Realistically, we've already kind of covered throughout this whole video, the fifth member for the OG Bloodline isn't going to make a ton of sense. Like, they're going to somehow, some way wrap a bow around it and be like, okay, this is what we're going to do.
Yep.
But it doesn't really make, it's not a square peg in a square hole, So if that was the fifth member, I would actually probably prefer that over Seth, just due to the elements of, like you said, you've got Paul and Punk, and what I just talked about with Brock, how you can have Roman and him kind of like fight over Paul. Like, now you could somewhat have Roman become jealous of Punk because now you've got Paul Heyman asking for, hey, Roman could be like, I don't need the help. Like, I'm the tribal chief. Like, why are you asking CM Punk? So you could do that there. And then, like you said, the Rollins Punk stuff, Bronson Reed, that's all fantastic stuff. Storyline wise, I would argue it makes the most sense to have Punk in the match.
Yeah.
Like, Rollins wise, like, everybody knows the history of Rollins and Reigns. That doesn't need to go. We don't need to go into that. It's like, I want something new and kind of refreshed, because like that Rollins and Roman stuff, like, I don't need that in the Bloodline stuff.
I need that to be my own separate thing.
Yeah, I need
that
Roman
ends at freaking Mania or something.
Yeah, I need Roman and Seth over here, and I need Roman and Bloodline over here.
Yeah, I completely agree. Not much to add to that. Not much to add to any of this. We've kind of gone through all of our things, so that just leaves us with one thing. If we were betting men, who are we going to bet on to be the fifth member for OG Bloodline?
Yeah, I'm still taking Seth Rollins. I just feel like they've put so much on TV that it's like, that seems to be the clear choice. Now they could just swerve it and go to Punk. Like you said, to kind of build up that Rollins Punk hatred. As much as we talked about like Rhea Ripley being gone and it not being like enough time for me to kind of really miss Punk, this would kind of be the same thing. I know Punk's been off TV for a little bit, but I still think you give him a little bit more time. War Games is a match, selfishly, that I am worried about him getting through physically. Those matches are obviously pretty physical. I'm worried about his body kind of breaking down. And if you have the long-term plans for Punk that we think that you should, I think that that's something you can avoid by not putting him in this.
If I'm going to bet on it,
well, if you're betting on it, you're taking the plus money. You're taking CM Punk.
Yeah. If I'm betting on it, I'm probably going to take CM Punk, and I'm going to do it selfishly because I am under the impression that the Seth Rollins joining Roman Reigns can't make any sense to me in this short of a time frame. He could show up on SmackDown. They could hash it out. Seth could even apologize. But to me, it's just like that story needs months of storytelling for Roman and Seth to even come to the point where they would be in a ring together at all, working together. Yep. So I just can't buy that. It's probably more logical to pick Seth, but I feel like you said, it's not like you said, the fifth member is probably not going to make much sense for the OG Bloodline. And if it's not going to make much sense, then let's have a big Punk return. Put him in this match. You can have some hostility between him and Seth Rollins maybe as well. Build that up. And then it's one of those things where it's obvious that this is a one-off with the Bloodline, and you just know that you can get him out of this the second we're done with it. You don't have to put more bows on it afterward either.
Yeah, and two, I guess, kind of give you more backup. Like the Roman Reigns phone call to Heyman at the end of SmackDown, like, why else would that happen if it wasn't for something like that? You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, if they just go out and get Rollins, is it going to be like another Rock return where they just don't speak of it? You know what I mean? Like,
good point.
They have to acknowledge it. They have to talk about it. I assume they will on SmackDown. So there has to be some sort of answers there. So that kind of goes in with your Punk point as well. And like you said, if you're not going to, like, if it's not going to make sense, then really make it not make sense. You know what I mean? I don't need like a muddied water. This kind of makes sense, but kind of doesn't, like flip-floppy thing. I don't really need that. You could definitely just do what you said.
Completely agree. Well, hopefully you guys all enjoyed our who's going to join the Bloodline discussion.
Yeah, banter. Yeah,
more than a list. We kind of, we are a podcast. We want to discuss. We want to dive deep into what we're feeling instead of just always doing lists. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that. But should be a fun episode of SmackDown, and Survivor Series is coming up. So big week next week. Looking forward to it. Anyway, follow us on all of our socials at COD WrestlePod, COD WrestlePod. Listen to us wherever you get your podcasts at YouTube, Spotify, Apple, etc. And if you want to come talk to us, follow us on all of our socials. Like, comment, subscribe, share with others. We have a Discord in our link tree. It's got all of our socials. So if you want to come talk to us, join that. But I'm Will. That's Brandon. We are the Cousins of Destruction Wrestling Podcast, and we will see you next time.